Like,
well, we have the man himself who wrote the thread here. Austin, we've been talking about your thread and the implications of it for the past 40 minutes now. And here we have the man himself.
Well, hello, everybody. How are you doing today?
hey, good
Doing
morning.
pretty good. So we read through
Welcome.
the thread, and there's definitely some things that like I think that everybody would be on board with, right? But we were really like hashing out the stickier points. Specifically, this one, we were starting this first part about the Treasury trying to create a new definition of what a cryptocurrency financial institution is, and how that would affect open source software development. Because I think that we're all on board with like crypto exchanges and other centralized VASPs being a part of like having to have better reporting requirements, right? And engaging in the same kind of financial surveillance that any other financial institution would. I think the issue that at hand that we were talking about was the applicability of these rules to open source software developers who are creating virtual asset wallets, and then additionally, more worrying, the people who are running certain blockchain nodes.
Certain, not all.
Yeah, the certain is interesting, and we can get back to that. But I would say, as you can tell from what I wrote, my general opinion is that is massively overbroad. The thing to really focus on is what is the core activity that people are actually engaging in, right? Like, is this a product where you have a direct, like, call it platform to client relationship that works like a traditional centralized financial institution? So fully custodial wallets, right? Like traditional custodians, exchanges, stablecoin issuers who are engaging in mint burn with clients. I think all of these, honestly, are pretty appropriate things to push these requirements onto. But when you draft your law for maximum optionality and wideness, and you start capturing things that you don't expect, you can have a real problem. Because to me, if you're interpreting this broadly beyond even non-custodial wallets, like there's a non-zero chance they literally just captured web browsers that allow you to have a wallet as a like add-in. Right. So was your intent that Chrome has to KYC everybody before they can use the internet? One would think not. That's clearly a First Amendment violation, among many other problems there. So I would tell you, I read a lot of this proposal myself as Treasury thinking about things through their lens of centralized financial intermediaries and then just blasting something out without the degree of technological sophistication that they need in order to really make this a granular and meaningful proposal. And if you look at some of the other things they're proposing, you can really only come down to the conclusion of, guys, either you didn't do your homework on the tech or this is straight up malfeasance because it would break the internet.
Yeah. And then the other, actually, I'll before I continue, do you want to ask any questions about that?
No, I mean, I don't have any questions. I'm
Well,
less of a doomer that like that all this stuff. To me, what I see is the government engaging with us. And like, yeah, we might not like where the conversation is in this moment, and that's fine. I'm not trying to push back against this. But like, I don't interpret this whole thing as like, oh my God, this is a continuation of the Patriot Act, and the government is like putting on their Darth Vader mask and coming for our favorite toys. And like, I see this as like, holy fucking shit. Us and the government is realizing that like it or not, this isn't going away, and we need to engage. And like, we're going to put out the way we'd like to engage. And that seems good to me.
Yeah, I mean, I would say I'm kind of in a middle ground between you and the doomerism. One thing to understand is the government is not a monolith. There are many forces within this, right? Because like this proposal is coming from Treasury, largely being driven by the administration, and is coming through the Senate through Senate banking, where you would look at people like Warner, Reid, Elizabeth Warren, probably as the driving forces behind it. These are the most crypto skeptical people in the entire U.S. government.
And sorry, for the record, I think Elizabeth Warren is like pretty fucking fantastic, and I think she needs to be educated on our specific technology. But like 9 times out of 10, I'm so pro Elizabeth Warren. I just wish she knew more about the things I cared about. But like, we need to get off this just like we have villains in the government against our industry like shtick.
So having dealt with some of Warren's staffers in the past, my view on Elizabeth Warren has historically been good idea, terrible execution, right? Like kind of defines her, is that somehow right now she's in a world where with the stance she's taken on technology, she has become the champion of big banks.
Yeah,
And I don't think she set out to do that deliberately, but if Jamie Dimon were bribing her, she wouldn't be doing anything differently. So you kind of look at that and you're like, like,
yeah.
how
Welcome
did
to
this happen?
2020.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So caveat, all of this is complicated. But I would say in terms of people who are likely to do constructive things, I think Senate banking is lower on the list because they come very much from a, hey, we want things centralized, we want control. We're like, call it US power maximalists. Right. And that's quite frankly antithetical to what crypto stands for. Crypto was not created to give the US government more control over your personal finances. Right. And so I think there's just an ideological problem there. On the other hand, I would tell you, I'm not sure this proposal is being received well by the rest of the Senate, much less the House. Right. And if you're looking at where things are, it wouldn't shock me if this ends up in a similar place to like where the CAN-C Act went, which is, oh, there was a bunch of noise from that one group that I just described. And then,
well, can we talk about the second part, because like the free speech, First Amendment questions, I think could hold up the question of Treasury going after some of these more complex entities like virtual asset wallet providers and DeFi platforms, and then also blockchain nodes, or certain blockchain nodes, they say. I think the thing that we spent more time talking about was the language around, I'm almost 100% certain it's targeting Tether, saying that they want to clarify OFAC jurisdiction over US-backed stablecoins. And by this, they mean legislation could explicitly authorize OFAC to exercise extraterritorial jurisdiction over transactions in stablecoins pegged to the USD as they generally would over USD transactions. And I completely agree with you here. I think this is like shocking that a non-US company that does not have US customers, that is issuing US debt in the form of a token, is somehow wrapped up into Treasury and OFAC's surveillance regime.
I don't like, Austin, I would love to get your opinion on this, because to me, this is like not even that interesting. Like, you have a foreign bank issuing close to $100 billion of a asset that is tradable one for $1, is backed by dollars, is like held in like like, to me, it makes sense that the US government is like, we can't allow major nodes in this network to issue dollars, else like we're gonna have a situation where there's just like just wild money printing by like weird Chinese companies.
And my point was that I think if you look at how the Eurodollar system is set up right now, it's account based, but in the future it could be token based with these non-US correspondent banks, financial institutions dealing with tokenized dollar deposits somehow. And my worry is that this is the type of language that will be used in the future to capture those types of entities.
Yeah, so I'll say two things to that. One, I would not describe Tether as issuing dollars, right? Like, the best way to look at Tether is as an offshore Eurodollar money market fund. For every dollar that Tether prints, they need to have $1 in reserves, right? And so if I certainly agree, if somebody were like issuing unbacked dollar like liabilities, that is of significant concern, because now you're messing with US monetary policy. But in terms of backed liabilities, this looks like Eurodollar money market funds. And that's
just to like, but that's the problem. We don't actually know with Tether if it's backed. Like,
right.
We're not talking about like USDC.
Let's come back to that one. I'll say only this. I know the Tether folks personally. I'm pretty confident they have all the
Okay, great. But like, you can't.
Well, hold on. Let's go back to the original point of that.
Yes.
But
let me at least say it this way. Tether is not purporting that they are issuing unbacked US dollars, right? With that said, backing away from just Tether, what we're really talking about here is the Eurodollar market, right? Which is gigantic. That is in the trillions, right? Tether, to be blunt, rounding error on like Eurodollar trading. And so to me, there's two layers embedded in this. One is, why specifically is blockchain the problem when you have this entire euro dollar market? Like, how about we just look at dollar trade coming out of Chinese banks if this is the concern, right? So one, the technological incompetence here is again sort of raising its head. Is it's like, it can't be our stance as a nation that, hey, it's totally cool if you do this stuff using a private ledger, but not if you use a blockchain. Like, that's crazy. That can't be the stance for terrorism financing. It can't be the stance for, like, if you're concerned about money printing, right?
I don't think that's crazy though. Like, I think there's a genuine point that, like, what's the difference between a private ledger and a public blockchain? Access to retail. Or sorry, other way around, retail's access.
There's no reason you could not give retail an access to a private ledger, right?
No, I know for sure, but I just think in that case, then it changed.
But if that's your concern, you should define it based on access to retail, because we cannot have a system where when I just change my back end, it becomes legal.
Well, you can though, because like there's a big difference in our system between public and private. And look, like I'm not the one writing the regulations. Like I know a lot more about the technology. I'm just saying, like.
Right, but I'm saying as a guy who worked at a bank,
yeah,
right? Like Signet is a blockchain implementation. Silvergate's SEN network was a private ledger. This legislation makes one of those legal and one of those illegal. Functionally, they are identical. That's crazy, right? That we cannot be doing that. If you're concerned about the activities, pick on the activities. Otherwise, what's going to happen is intelligent technologists are immediately going to find a way around the rule that you wrote by using a different implementation of the technology, and you're dead in the water. It needs to be activities based.
Yeah.
Two,
yeah,
there are giant amounts of dollar trading outside the United States that are used for terrorism finance, are used for the exact bad activities they're claiming to interdict that they don't even attempt to address here. So to me, the way they wrote this is pretty transparently to cripple like blockchain while ignoring the problem, which is even larger in other spaces. So that, hold on. That's part one. I don't even think that's the bigger problem. The extraterritoriality part of, if we want to say that because somebody somewhere used dollars to do a thing, we should have regulation over it, we need to understand that normalizing that stance has massive implications because, for instance, I deal with the JFSA, right? Japan's Financial Services Authority. Very smart people, very intelligent. They play by the rule of law. They're well-intentioned in the space. But if the US comes out with that stance, they're going to be totally justified to be like, oh, so if JP Morgan trades CDS on a Japanese company with a US asset manager, we regulate that now and it has to go through Japan. Right? Because that is the same statement in the other direction. You are essentially saying if you create a local link on the ground using our currency or our economy, we regulate it. And I'm just saying that is not the world we live in right now with global financial regulation. So stating that that is our policy going forward is flipping the apple cart on the regime that has been in place for like many, many, many decades. That is not a small statement, and it will have dramatic implications for things like the status of the dollar as a reserve currency.
Because many of these rules, once they're implemented, they're reciprocated by our international partners, right?
Correct. Because now you're going to have everybody else saying the same thing back to the United States. Like, oh, if somebody in the US uses euro, the European Union is going to say, well, we regulate that now. And you'd better believe they're going to use that as a hook to get after all our tech companies who they already don't like, and so on and so forth. And so to me, it's a question of trying to move from the norms of we regulate the activity based on geographic locale to we regulate the activity based on currency used. That is a gigantic regime change in financial regulation.
Look, I mean, I definitely take your point that all this stuff is like super complex, and like the tricky part about lots of stuff is like, look, I think you can read this not as like a whole set of regulations about like terrorism financing and euro dollars and all this stuff. I think you can look at it as like bank stablecoin regulation, and like maybe, you know, because he kept talking about like why are we going after stablecoins when like the euro dollars it's so much bigger and like this isn't even a rounding error and stuff, and it's like, well, because they're dealing with crypto, you know.
Well, but my counterpoint is the inception point for this specific bill is that they were concerned about Hamas like illicit financing. And my point is, if you're going to be concerned about that,
politics, though, right? Like,
but everything political, or all of these things going around in Washington are political. And I'm just saying, if you want to interdict terrorism financing, I'm on board with that. Like, I support Treasury's like driving point here, which is we don't want people getting money to commit acts of terror. I'm cool with that. But what I'm not cool with is using that as a Trojan horse to stuff through a let's ban blockchain bill. If you actually want to do that, just say that. And again, the other part is you should do it like purely through legislation rather than administrative rulemaking.
And Rex, I mean, like, I think that it's just taken in a bubble of saying like, okay, let's not look at anything else the Treasury's ever done in its existence or any of the other laws that have been used to provide extraterritorial powers for the United States. Is just like it's just blind, right? Because like if you go back to something like FATCA, which most Americans don't know about, but essentially says that any non-U.S. financial institution that has U.S. customers, that onboards U.S. persons, has to, and that deals in anything more than $10,000 cumulatively over the entire year, has to submit to U.S. Treasury financial surveillance, a lot of compliance, and essentially like spy on their customers, submit forms, and then I also have to submit forms if I have international institutions, all in the name of tax compliance. And this was essentially used to destroy the centuries-long precedent for like Swiss banking or private Swiss banking, and almost every other
private Swiss banking.
I'm
for like financial privacy.
Hold on,
right?
I'll hop in there and say, as somebody who's got a lot of friends who are expats, this is kind of why I hate this stuff. This is where the argument is in the public sphere. Do you know what the real like result of FATCA was? If you're an American working abroad, good fucking luck getting a bank account.
Goodbye.
Yeah. Like, I have a friend who literally lost his job and moved back to the United States because all of the banks in his country teabagged him and were like, we're not doing this.
You guys, we're so far off topic. I jumped on this stream today to say because the like conversation for the first 45 minutes was evil government, we're all screwed, like fuck this. And the point that I jumped on to say was that you can look at this proposed language as a bad thing. I choose to look at it as the government coming to the table and engaging with crypto. And yes, we might not like the rhetoric or the choices or whatever. Let's all just take a moment and realize how dysfunctional and broken Washington is, so nothing's happening anyway. But I look at it as a good thing that the SEC is like coming to the table.
Well, again,
hold on. This is not the SEC. This is the Treasury.
Sorry, yeah. Rex, what I would say here is that like I think there may be good intentions, but if there's any sort of broad language within a rule or law that gets passed, it will be exploited to the fullest extent by future lawyers or future administrations who say that what can we do? We have this situation which we want to pursue, which we need to find the ability to go and do. So like I have an army of lawyers. They're going to go read line by line through every single rule that we have on the books and figure out how we can make this not illegal and go do it somewhere. I mean, we saw this with like Bush and the whole waterboarding thing, Guantanamo. Like there's just when you start to include broad language that has like very wide interpretations, it just sets up for like terrible future like atrocities and events to happen perpetrated by the United States government or governments.
Making processes about to like whittle this down.
Yeah, but this is like I'm just saying like the things that have been passed. Like if we only have to look to what, like 2 years or 3 years ago when the IRS bill was passed by Congress. And now look what they're trying to do. I mean, it looks like a gross overreach of what the IRS is trying to enact. I mean, there's been, thousands of letters, tens of thousands of letters sent out now trying to raise concerns about how this would be a gross overreach of the IRS and create undue amounts of paperwork for people who never had to submit paperwork in the first place. So
I mean, I get it. Like our government sucks. I don't think it sucks.
I think it's the best. I think it's the best in the entire world. But
that's the point I'm trying to get to, man. Because like this is part of the process, and these rules like suck, but it goes through the process. And like Then the Senate Banking Committee gets to put in their say, and then the House Republicans shoot it down because they're too busy doing some like monkey circus, and then it goes back to Treasury, or whatever. Like, this is part of the process, and I just don't think that we should look at this and be like, it's insane that anyone's even thinking about rules. Like, they're trying to ruin it. Like this is engagement. We want engagement.
Well, I'll say for my part, I don't have a problem with them looking at rules. What I'm concerned about is that in the year 2023, we still don't understand that validators don't KYC people, right? To me, the concern is more, if this is your starting point, ignoring that I agree, actually, some additional rules to be tech neutral would probably be good for this conduct in general. And by the way, I also support the idea of things like mandatory penalties for these acts so that the banks can't all skate by doing this stuff while blockchain companies get penalized. Like, let's harmonize that too. But my worry is this is starting with rules that are so far out of touch with reality that it makes you wonder if the other side is negotiating in good faith, right? Like, this would be a little bit like the equivalent, of the Republicans starting a negotiation for an abortion bill being like, well, if you have a miscarriage, death penalty. Right. It's like, it's so far removed from reality in the political spectrum and understanding of the problem that it raises concerns for me about how it was written.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, but we all agree that nobody who put a pen to paper for any of this understands jack shit about blockchain or about distribution.
I would disagree. I think the U.S. government has good understanding of what these blockchain systems are, how all this money is issued. And if you've read anything that they've put out in the past 2 to 3 years, it's been very on point. Like, you go read those IRS rules, they get it. Like, they understand every single thing that can happen in all these transactions, down to what the nodes do and what these DeFi protocols do. They get it. They've had a long time to look at these things, and so I don't think that that's a good argument. I think they know what they're asking for, and it's it doesn't matter if it's DOJ or with the Treasury or the IRS or the SEC or anybody. Like, they've had 13 years to study crypto now, and I think they get it. So I don't want to take up too much of your time, Austin. I said 10 minutes, and we've gone on for 20.
I was going to warn you, I've got to bounce out of here in about 4 minutes because I'm going to be somewhere physically at 11:30. So
So thank you everybody for staying on late. We went over about 15 minutes, but it was great to have you, Austin. I really enjoyed the thread, and we'll be keeping up to date with your continued investigation into these Treasury rulemaking process.
All right. Sounds good. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Evening or morning, whatever, wherever you are. It's dark in your picture.
Yeah, it is technically morning, but I am in an apartment in New York City, so it's always dark.
Got it. So you're in your apartment, in your kitchen, in your bathroom?
Exactly. Well, all of which are the same thing.
Yeah, exactly. All right, everybody. Thank you for tuning in. We will be back tomorrow. Make sure to like and subscribe, and also follow everybody on Twitter. We'll put this up in the Telegram chat, and we will see you tomorrow. Actually, no, we'll see you Monday. Have a good weekend touching grass. Go kiss your family. Tell your loved ones that you love them. And we'll be back on Monday.